Hello YouTube, this is Asatsu5 and I wanted to talk about audiobooks. Some of you may or may not know that I've kind of gotten into audiobooks. I did a review over the dramatized NIV Bible and it wasn't a very popular video, but uh, I will say this, I said this in that review, I don't think I could have finished the Bible without that app. Some of you also may know that I'm extremely dyslexic, and I'm going to take a short amount of time to talk about how bad dyslexic I am and why audiobooks have been just awesome for me. And this is not an advertisement for Audible. You will not find the Audible app in the description or Audible link in the description. And so, and yeah, so just to set the stage, my grandmother's dyslexic, my mom's dyslexic, my dad's dyslexic, my brother's dyslexic, I'm dyslexic. I am severely dyslexic, like on a whole nother level of dyslexic. If Vegeta was to use his scouter on me, he would yell, "It's over 9,000." But yeah, and my brother is slightly dyslexic, but he was given tools to help him overcome that disability or that handicap. They put him in the dyslexic program, and he did very well in it. My parents tried to get me into the dyslexic program, but the school district did everything possible to keep me out of it. And the reason is, some of you may hear it, I have a speech impediment. I'm also dysgraphic, and I'm dyslexic. So I can't read very well, can't write pretty much at all, and I have a speech impediment. This painted a terrible picture of my cognitive ability that is false. And so the teachers... Well, the dyslexic teacher had a reputation of being the super teacher, and I was a difficult case, and she didn't want me to tarnish her reputation. And finally got into the dyslexic program my last year at that school, at that elementary, and I ended up leaving that dyslexic program at my home school and having to leave my home school momentarily to visit a private school to take the dyslexic program. Like, I still attended the public school, but the last few minutes of the public school, I would leave to go to a private school to be tutored in the dyslexic program. And I actually ended up doing that a little bit in the summer as well, and I accidentally released her horses on a ranch or farm or whatever it was. But that's another story. But yes, I am extremely dyslexic, I have very bad dysgraphia, and I have a speech impediment, and that doesn't paint a very pretty picture. And I was able to go to college for free for X amount of time because I was so dyslexic and so dysgraphic. The problem being that once I got to college, the people in charge of helping handicapped people, and if you're deaf, they'll get you an interpreter to do sign language. If you're if you can't walk, they'll find someone to drive you around the campus. Stuff like that. When I got to that person, she pretty much said, what's your deal? She looked at someone else who was dyslexic. It was like, these people are dyslexic and they did very well in their studies and they did very well in school and stuff. What's your deal? And I was like, well, I pretty much skipped the fourth grade unintentionally, and the teachers refused to teach me. And I can talk about that more later. I think I've already talked about it. But she refused to help me. She actually made me get a IQ test. She made me take another IQ test. I've taken many IQ tests. And I took an IQ test that was developed for dyslexic people. I think it was. And I got around 119, which isn't amazing, but it's a little bit above average. And I'll share that with you. And when I took this IQ test for this lady who I really rather forget, I got a 60 on it. Now, your IQ doesn't drop from 119 to 60. It just doesn't happen. I went the whole fourth grade without doing anything in my homeroom. I took a few remedial classes, I played at recess, I did the gym thing, but pretty much I was not taught anything in the fourth grade. I was outside playing cards. They sent the kids that they didn't want to teach outside. I want to play goldfish, whatever, talk. So I just did not have the tools that everybody else had. And so, anyways, back on the subject of dyslexia. My dyslexia was so bad in my hometown, there was a road called Denman Road. I was in college before I realized it was at Dead Man's Road. So, it's something I continue to struggle with. It's not as big of an issue as it was in the past, but I still struggle with it. And, so reading is very difficult for me. A somewhat famous quote of mine is that I love books, I hate reading. And that's very true. I love the information that's inside books. I spent a lot of time in libraries checking out different books, mostly historical books and stuff. And so I love books, I hate reading. And I was never made to read in public school, at least not very often. The one novel that I can say that I read legitimately is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is not a difficult book, especially for the average person, but, reading is difficult for me. I don't have the reading muscle that most people have. The longer I read, the less I comprehend, the more difficult it is for me to stay focused, and reading is a chore for me. It's very difficult. That being said, audiobooks. I got my first audiobook was the NIV Bible. Finished it. It was awesome. And and this is going to be the audiobook review of the book that I'm reviewing at the moment. I didn't put it in the title because I didn't want to put you off on the video, because I wanted you to listen to why I like audiobooks. And if you are interested in the book review, I would encourage you to listen to it. You can watch that now. But that is the Diary of Anne Frank. And before you close the video, I know what you're thinking. We read Diary of Anne Frank in school. What is there to know? Well, I'm willing to wager you don't know Anne how I know Anne. And this is for a few reasons. There's different versions of the Diary of Anne Frank. There's like the A model, or the A series, the B series, and the C series. The A series is the series her father censored, and I'll get back to that more later. But her father censored certain parts of the diary, and that's the version that we know in the public school system. And I don't think they actually read the whole entire Diary of Anne Frank in the public school system. At least I don't remember it. But then again, I did not go to a lot of classes. I didn't go to the normal classes, at least. But then there was the B series. The B series is more of the raw version of Diary of Anne Frank, censored slightly by Anne herself. And I'll get more to that later. And then there's the C version. And I think the C version has some writing in it that's not necessarily diary material, but it's more expansive. So you have the abridged version, you have the unabridged version, and then you have the diary plus extra writing. And I got the unabridged version. Now, why did Anne's father, Pip, I think his name was Pip, something like that. That was like her pet name for him. But why did her father censor the book? Well, the time period that she started keeping the diary was around the age of 13, and she was murdered at 15. And she was coming of age. She talks about certain things that happen when you come of age, and some biological things, and new interest, should I say, stuff that during that time period wasn't proper for women to talk about openly. It wasn't proper to talk about in mixed company, and it's kind of embarrassing if you're the father. She was getting sexually mature. She was talking about that subject, and her father just didn't want that to be public, so he cut that stuff out of the A version of the diary. And in the unabridged version, you get that. You get her raw thoughts on just about every subject. Not necessarily graphic, although there is a scene in there where she describes anatomy. But you get the true Anne, or you get like 90% of true Anne. The part of the book that she censored herself was the dirty jokes. I don't know if you heard, but Anne Frank was pretty much the inventor of the Holocaust joke, and she was joking about SS soldiers and the French, and stuff like that, and she censored that herself because she was embarrassed by them, and she didn't want her parents to read them. But those were discovered. Or was discovered that was what was on those pages. Anyways, back to Anne Frank. In this book, it's a diary, but it's not just dates and events. You get to know Anne, and you get to know her innermost thoughts. You get to know her opinions as you get to experience her mature from being kind of a bratty kid to a teenager. And she had a very strained relationship with her mother. She had a somewhat strained relationship with her sister. She grows to have a healthier relationship with her sister. And she writes down her thoughts. She writes down Mr. Dougal's thoughts that he shares. The Van Dam's family thoughts. I think it's the Van Dams. It's not Van Trapp. Or Van Trapp, because that's the Sound of Music people. But she writes down Peter's thoughts. She has a lot to say about Peter, who's a younger gentleman that she kind of has an interest in. But she talks about everybody who shares those thoughts with her. She writes it down. She talks about her own thoughts, her opinions. And you get to know Anne. You know her on a very personal level, and it's. I felt that I became friends with her. It's weird. I've never had this connection with someone through writing, because I suck at reading. Reading cursive is even more difficult for me. So I never had a connection with someone through writing, through the written word. And you really get to know Anne, and you get to know her kind of bitchy side, should I say, and you get to know the tender side, the side that's caring and loving and wants to nurture, and you get to know pretty much everybody in the annex or attic. So, anyways, I encourage you to read this. I love history. And I wanted to get to know Anne in the unabridged version, and it's weird. We all here studying World War II that I think it was like 6 million people were murdered for being different, and it was Joseph Stalin who said, a death of a man is a tragedy. A death of a million men is a statistic. And not that Joseph Stalin is necessarily a good guy. He's a terrible person and stuff. But I kind of find this to be true. If something happens and a lot of people are displaced, there's a lot of people killed, we put money in the jar at the gas station or whatever, buy raffle tickets, raise money for them, but we're emotionally disconnected with them for the most part. I'm talking about the average person. There was not a real connection between us and them. We might care about them, but they have no faces. But if the prom queen on prom night gets in a car accident, on her way back from prom and dies, people are crying. They're mourning. This is such a terrible thing. If someone close to your family kills himself, not necessarily your family, but just someone that in the community kills themselves or gets in a drunk driving accident or falls asleep at the wheel or gets murdered, we're a lot more emotionally attached and invested with those people, and it hits home. So I think the importance of the Diary of Anne Frank is we get a face with these people being persecuted. We get to know them. We get an emotional connection with them. And it's not just 6 million people murdered by the Nazi movement. It's a family, and not just the family, but their friends. And not just their friends, the dentist that they decided to take in. We get to know these individuals, their personalities, their likes and dislikes, what they had to go through, the food they had to eat, being trapped in a attic or annex. Those different stories. When I say stories, I mean levels, not necessarily like narratives, but we get to know their living conditions, and we get to know their fears of, are we being discovered? It's very, very eye-opening, and I know this is getting long. I'll try to wrap it up, but I got an emotional connection with Anne Frank and her family, and when it came time to the end of the book where they talked about Mrs. Von Trapp being gassed, Peter being sent off on the death march, Anne and what's her name? Margot. Anne and Margot, they're sisters, being sent to this concentration camp away from their family to be murdered. I was telling my brother about this and asking him questions about different things, and I got kind of choked up. I didn't tear up, I didn't cry, but I started to. I don't know if y'all do this, but like if I'm talking about a particular subject that I'm very emotional in a sad way connected with, not like passion motion, but I'm emotionally invested and it bums me out, I'll kind of, hyperventilate. It's almost like I'm laughing, but I'm hyperventilating and I'm getting ready to cry or break down. So I didn't actually tear up, but I was starting to, because I was seriously bummed out about, they talk about this is when Anne was murdered. This is pretty much the group of people she was with when she was murdered. They talk about the different individuals and what concentration camp they were sent to and how they died. The only one person that survived from that annex was Anne Frank's father. And having to outlive your kids, your wife, that has to be a terrible thing. So I encourage you to listen to the book, get the unabridged version, and you will experience things as they experience things. And at the end of the book, I truly think you'll lose a friend, not in a physical sense, but you'll lose Anne. If you don't get an emotional connection with the rest of the family, I don't know how emotionally involved you'll be with the rest of the family, but you will get to know Anne, and you will lose her. And it's sad, but it's that was how powerful this book was for me. And although I knew the outcome of the book, I knew that they pretty much all of them were killed. Is still knowing that when it came time to get that information, I was genuinely bummed out. So that's it. I encourage you to get audiobooks if you're dyslexic. It'll open up a whole new world for you. You get to hear stories that you won't have access to anyways, or any other way. You don't have to wait for Hollywood to spoon feed you a um, a distorted story that is made TV appropriate. You get to experience real books, real stories, but in audio form. So that's it. I'm a Satsu 5, and I'm out.